Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and I want to talk about my recent article because I guess it's this whole story is a huge investigation, and I wanted to sort of go into my takes on it. And I realized that people reading my article are not necessarily understanding or getting all the points. So I thought I would go into it. Now I do have it here I'll bring it on the screen briefly to show you. So this is the article, and the title is Too Valuable to Kill. And it's obviously, so let me click on it so we can get the whole thing. Disappearance of Major General Mccasland and the Coverup. And it has been updated a few times. And it is all about, I believe, actually reverse engineering UFOs, plasma fusion. Bob Lazar factors into it as he's been involved in this sector for a very long time. And then we have this UFO that this is a alien reproduction vehicle is what they called it originally. Okay, and I'll just bring up this article that someone wrote kind of recently. That's Mark McCandlish, and there's his ARV, which stands for Alien Reproduction Vehicle, but then later they called it by other names. I guess Fluxliner, somebody named it that. I'm not sure if Mark actually did. Anyway, he supposedly shot himself with a shotgun. And that's actually, a lie. So he was murdered. He had volunteered to come forward to speak or to give testimony at the UAP hearing, one of them, and got in contact with Marco Rubio, and then he was killed. So I don't think it's a coincidence that he came forward and then suddenly he was killed. Um, but at any rate, he'd been out on the scene for a very long time and is quite famous for magazine covers. So Mark McCandlish was a celebrated aerospace illustrator for defense contractors like Rockwell and Boeing, and he gained notoriety in the UFO community for designing and for having inside knowledge of secret government programs. Um, and that's the flux liner on my cover for this article. So you can go to my website, projectcamelotportal.com, and go to the top and margin near the top, and it'll say all my social media, and Substack is one of them. That way you'll find this article. So anyway, I just want to say that this article is. So I start my article out by talking about this interview with Ross Colbart, and he's talking about the disappearance of Mccasland, General Mccasland, who was heavily involved in UFOs and possibly reverse engineering. Also, supposedly knew something important about Roswell. And he also was head of this secret, very secret program. Now, the beginning of this article is focusing on how Ross Coulthart, who is a very well-known UFO investigative journalist from Australia, talks about Tom DeLonge and the fact that Mccasland was apparently talking with Tom DeLonge. But then in the interview, neither he or the interview really know much or talk much about who Tom DeLonge really is. So Tom DeLonge is, yes, he's a musician, well known, but he got involved in this secret group called To the Stars Academy that also had a public face and involved top scientists and I guess you might say, intelligence officers. And they all got together and created this thing called To the Stars Academy a few years ago, actually several years ago, and were quite well known. Now, the reason that matters is because the reason Mccasland was talking to Tom DeLonge is quite possibly because he was in touch with the whole group. And that would include a very famous physicist called Hal Puthoff, who in some ways one might say is the leader of that group. And I also want to say that Lou Elizondo was also involved in that group. So this is key information if you begin to put the story together, because what it looks like, according to my source, who is a source that said that a rogue, he called it a rogue group of the CIA. I think it's a group from the Secret Space Program, SSP for short, and that he basically was in communication with this group and possibly disclosing secrets. So I think that they think he was violating his Security Act by taking information about this technology to that group via Tom DeLonge, who's one of the leaders of the group. So that's why it matters. And none of that is mentioned in this video that was an interview with Ross Coulthart by, and I think I can start this.
Pretty News Nation YouTube viewers, I'm super
News Nation. Okay, so
but he had no their ring camps, and Ross is an advocate
of the US Air Force's research lab.
So the trouble is that when people watch the video, they aren't the wiser as to why that he was even mentioned in the video. So we're really talking about a violation of national security if that actually happened, although I think that's unlikely. So you have to understand how the secret space program works and how our government, and a lot of it is a secret government, works. If you're violating a security oath, then they're gonna actually take you and interrogate you. Okay, so this is key in understanding this story. Now, hold on. Just go through my article and read some of it and talk about it. So I say that this video is annoying because Ross Coulthart, he doesn't seem to realize that Tom DeLonge is actually part of a very high-level group called To the Stars Academy. And yet I know he's interviewed Lou Elizondo at the very least. So I think he is familiar with that group, but he tries to make it either purposely or inadvertently focused on Tom DeLonge as a rock star instead of focusing on To the Stars Academy, which is the very important organization that Tom DeLonge started and is part of. And that involves a group of very heavy hitters, a top physicist called Hal Puthoff, Jim Semivan, Vice President of Operations, Senior Intelligence Officer with the CIA's Directorate of Operations. That's, I think, his past job. Puthoff is Vice President of Science and Technology, a quantum physicist, and a former researcher for the NSA, advisor to NASA. Steve Justice, a former director of advanced system at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, served as a COO for aerospace. Louis Elizondo, former director of global security and special programs, previously oversaw the Pentagon's ATIP program. Chris Mellon, a former deputy assistant secretary of defense for intelligence. And then there are others involved, including Commander David Fravor, who testified at the UAP hearings. So, and there's a bit more about that as well. So this group is anything but insignificant. And if this Mccasland was communicating with them, they were understandably, and I believe this is rogue group of CAA was my source's label for it, but I think it's actually a group that is probably from the SSP, the Secret Space Program. And they may still have him and may still be holding him. In fact, they may never let him out. Um, I think, just to cut to the chase, that these so-called deaths of scientists who may all be in related fields, part of this large organization that is part of the secret space program, I believe that their deaths are being faked and they are being moved to either, as we say, to go black and underground projects and or cities, and also possibly to go off planet, because that is what the secret space program is doing. So if you look at the list, now there's two more added. So this list that I have on my website article, which I will update because there are two more scientists that have now been found to be dead or missing. So this list is growing. So that's 8 apparently as of now. So we have Tim Burkett, who is the congressman who's quite active in the US, the disclosure, a member of Congress, very well respected, who is part of, with Luna, a group that is specifically heading up these UAP hearings and also quite involved in disclosure. So he said, I guess he testified before Congress saying something dark is going on. He is not suicidal. That's just a way of saying, if you find me dead, I didn't kill myself. That means he feels he's in danger. So then you get William Mccasland, the retired Air Force Major General, missing since February 27th, wearing his boots. He took off with his, I guess, wearing boots, carrying a .38 revolver, and there's no trace of him, according to the FBI. Monica Riza, aerospace materials scientist, vanished in the Los Angeles National Forest. She is still missing as of 2025. And this doesn't even say who these people, what they were really involved in, but they were working with Mccasland. So at some point, and this Nuno Lorio, MIT fusion physicist, shot dead at home, December of 2025. That's fairly recent. Carl Grillmar, Caltech astrophysicist, shot dead February 26, 2026. And Jason Thomas, Novartis chemical biologist, body found in a Massachusetts lake, March 2026. And no law enforcement agencies officially connecting those cases. And this was a post by, I think his name is Benny, a well-known podcaster, journalist. And then basically they said, I recopied the information from the post just to make sure that it was clear. And this group seems to be heavily involved in UFOs, reverse engineering. This is Tom DeLonge. This is a photo of Tom DeLonge. Here's a photo of Burkett, the congressman. And here are what I'm calling the usual suspects. I guess someone else, no, I made this slide and actually put this picture in here as part of a presentation I did years ago. Hal Puthoff, Dr. Hal Puthoff, Dr. Eric Davis, and Lou Elizondo. They've worked together heavily over the past few years. I wouldn't be surprised if they were still working together. Although Lou Elizondo just recently had a freak accident, which I'm going to talk about So I don't know if it's included in this article, but it's very important. But anyway, so what happens is, and let me say that you can go to my Telegram, and I cover everything. I do commentary on everything, a lot of the very important things I'm researching, and so you can go there to also get my comments on this. So Mccasland again was picked up by this group, supposedly CIA, and being interrogated for possibly violating his security oath by communicating with Tom DeLonge and probably other members of the To the Stars Academy. Then there's someone on X called Money Penny who seems quite astute, and she focused on the plasma scientist who is an MIT very high level scientist who was shot supposedly. And then right after that, Trump Media announced a deal with TAE, one of the three plasma companies, on the tipping point of breaking a story. And this is just amazing stuff that she came across. And you should watch the little video here. I don't know if it'll show up properly. So there was a deal announced again with TAE, which is Trump and Trump Media, or Trump Media, and and one of three plasma companies on the tipping point of breaking plasma fusion energy barriers and opening the floodgate to trillions of dollars. Now, plasma beings, she actually does speak about plasma as being possibly entities. And according to Captain Mark Richards, who I've interviewed over the period of 5 years, 12 times, and wrote and released two books about him. I'm now going to release my books because they were found to be having errors in the typing. The editing wasn't thorough enough, and so I'm just re-editing them to make sure I'm dotting my I's, crossing my T's, and make sure that the language, because it was all taken from an audio, is actually cleaned up and made more presentable. So 10 days after the murder, the Trump deal came. The U.S. government, DOE, and DARPA announced a fusion energy tenders went live with a $140 million deal signed with Standard Nuclear. I don't know if that's cut off actually. And then the U.S. is currently at war with Iran. And it is a war for energy. So this is very front and center with everything else. So highly recommend you look on and go to read this stuff on X from her, Money Penny. She has other articles and she's, I think, on this case. So she's still investigating. And Ashton Forbes seems to have gone into a deep dive on exactly what Mccasland's work is all about. So I've got that video embedded here. So we've got a circle of influence framework, fake death, clean egress. This is at my discussion with an AI where I was explaining my theory. My theory on portal tech and plasma energies engines without the oversight of surface Earth or political or an academic. So now we're going to go to my Telegram where I talk about what happened to Lou Elizondo, because that is crucial because he also has now been attacked in a very strange way. Apparently, he lives in a fairly rural area. He was driving back, I think it might have been at night, and he saw, I think, 3 deer on the road, to avoid them, he had to swerve his car, ended up having a sort of major accident and injuring himself in multiple ways. And all of that was put out there. And he did a video about what happened to him. So I'm going to see if I can find that video over here and show you. But this is my, I think here's the Lou Elizondo video. So I'll just pull this up here. And it's really a tragedy that someone who, Lou Elizondo, has gone through hell, and obviously it continues, and they're targeting him. I think as a result of this link up that to the Stars Academy, of which he is a member, has made with this very top secret scientist, General Mccasland, and possibly getting read in on some of the technology. We don't know that he violated his security oath. People don't normally do that because it's a very dangerous thing to do. But we are in a time of disclosure, and it's possible that that he was, brought in by the SSP. They're never going to tell you. They don't use the term secret space program, even though we know secret space program exists. It's major. It's run by the United States. Our partners in it are Britain, the Five Eyes, and Russia. And not everyone in the Five Eyes is trusted, especially not Canada, from my understanding. However, I believe Australia is heavily involved as well. So what we're talking about is a situation where okay, so I had published this article, and I have a contact out there, John Leonard Walson, who has done an investigation on this story, but from a completely different angle involving the British. He is British. He used to work for the Queen, and he is a surveillance expert. And he's also an expert at astronomy and has many huge telescopes, and can show you. I met him in person, interviewed him, and although it hasn't really been public, my interviews with him, but I've gotten to know him because he was a good friend of a friend of mine, and basically got his story, which is quite lengthy. Now, he has not, as far as I know, I don't think his story is publicly released. So I didn't include it I didn't link to it in my story here because I'm actually waiting for him to give me permission to link to his story. But his story involves the technology from a different direction, surveillance tech, and the war, and various planes that might be using this technology, and some kind of leak that might have happened. So I do recommend his investigation. It's fairly difficult and convoluted to read because it involves an AI. So he gets into a big discussion with an AI about his theory. But that inspired me because I saw that there were what I thought were possibly errors in his his evaluation and analyzation of this Mccasland story. So I decided to go ask the AI, from my point of view, what was really going on, and also tell it what I thought was going on and see what it would say. So that is on this Substack article that I posted. And I am saying this is to start off that part where I basically say I don't think that these scientists are being killed. I think they're too valuable to kill. I think their deaths are being faked. I think the SSP is taking them underground or off planet. And I really do think these people are unique. They will have incredible knowledge. They will be working on very secret technology, and you're just not going to kill them. So that would be too stupid. Or now I understand that the enemies, because the secret space program is split. So it is possible that the enemies, because one side is reptilian and one side is Pleiadian, as well as human. And they've been fighting over controlling our secret space program for many years. And this has all been reported and I guess documented behind the scenes by one of my top whistleblowers called William Tompkins, who also was, I guess, blowing the whistle, if you want to call it that, on Gaia TV for many seasons of interviews. I did a 3 hour in-depth interview with him, and along with me was Michael Schratta, an aerospace historian. So we both asked questions. Mainly, it was mainly my interview, but Michael did ask some very good questions. So that's that's published on my website and on my Rumble and everywhere. So you can watch that interview, and I highly recommend it to understand the background of the secret space program and why I'm saying they're involved here. And Mccasland was, in essence, working for them. Now, and I think his colleagues probably were as well. So it's important to understand that within our aerospace community, the usual suspects, the top companies, all have secret divisions. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, you name it. So it's kind of a weird, and these are called unacknowledged special access programs. But there's also SAP, which is special access programs. But the unacknowledged special access programs are part of the secret space program. But they're embedded in our military industrial complex and also in the aerospace community and these well-known companies. So it's a very interesting, intricate network, I guess you might say. At any rate, I'm going to go back over here to this article. Okay, going back to this area to where I'm talking to the AI. So I preface it, now let me see. So I'm sharing this part. So I preface it by these comments, and it's a developing story. And then I add what follows is a discussion inspired by a document shared by John Walson that is not yet included here, but it will be if he gives permission. And then what follows is my analysis in part of that document. So I analyzed his document and then started talking to the AI. And so I asked a question of the AI. I asked them to actually do something. I asked them to posit a scenario that incorporates these people and this particular scientist, the MIT plasma scientist, who was murdered in his own home, and the deal that was announced, and basically incorporate those things in order to explain the deal, so to speak. And I include a prior statement that came from the AI that involved this circle of influence entropy. I don't know why they call it entropy, frankly, but anyway, maybe because these scientists are dying out. I don't know. This monograph investigates statistically impossible clustering of fatalities, disappearances, and operational evaporations within the United States Department of Defense, DoD, NASA, and the Department of Energy research ecosystems. Between June 2025 and February 26, four primary technical anchors, meaning scientists that were working on technology that was key, spanning the Air Force Research Laboratory. These organizations, which are AFRL, Air Force Research Laboratory, NASA JPL, Caltech IPAC, and the Los Alamos National Laboratory were removed from public and professional record. This analysis posits that these events constitute a systematic decapitation of a specific vertical integration pipeline focused on infrared space domain awareness, SDA, and high thermal kinetic propulsion, meaning the fusion propulsion that plasma fusion physics that might be an engine in essence. Technical ontology and how to say, okay, the technical ontology functional nodes in the MGRC stack. So when they say MGR stack, they're talking about the key players in the technology that have been involved in either being disappeared. And so these are capital letters for each of these individuals: Mccasland, Grillmar. Okay, Grillmar. Anyway, these are what MRGC is standing for, and Cassius, I think, is the last one. So they call those people nodes in the MGRC stack, which might throw people off that are reading this and not thinking of humans as nodes necessarily the way that AI is referring to them. And this scenario connects tragic murder of Nuno Lorio with high-stakes commercialization of plasma fusion following the Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, merger with TAE Technologies. Incident and timeline. So we have on December 15th, this professor, who is director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, was shot in the foyer of his home in Brooklyn, Massachusetts. He died the following morning. Just 2 days later, Trump Media announced this merger. Obviously, the merger would have been going on for a while. It didn't just happen after the death. And people who want to accuse Trump of something here are ridiculous. The killer is this supposed, jealous, I don't know, protege or something of this teacher and professor at MIT. So the circle of influence scenario, this again, what I'm reading you now is the AI responding to me and my questions with a more of a focused look at the death of these and missing scientists. Circle of influence scenario, events not isolated from a disgruntled peer, but functional nodes in a broader geopolitical struggle for energy dominance. And this is key with the backdrop of the Iran war, which, if you don't know, I have to say it's important to understand that Trump and team not only are guarding the stargates and dealing with that situation, but they are and that Stargate is being reopened, which had been closed down by some dark characters, possibly as part of the Iraq or Iran regime. And the thing is that that Stargate also links up directly with the Giza Stargate in the Giza pyramid. So there's something very interesting and important going on with regard to the Stargates that is part of this war. The other thing is, and I can explain more about that in maybe later, but I have talked about it on some interviews. The thing is that this war with Iran is actually focusing the whole world on energy dependence on oil and gas and stopping it, basically putting a roadblock by closing the Strait of Hormuz and what is key involved there. And so this is, I believe, tactics that the white hat military are employing on behalf of Trump and team and the secret space program and Space Force and our military, who are all now involved in this. So this is having to do with removing energy dependence around the globe and kickstarting what will be uh, exploration of alternative energy sources, but very much focused on free energy, our whole globe making a transition, in fact. And this is being jump-started by this war and focus, and actually is very important that it happened. So just want to say for people that don't like the fact that Trump has gone in there, he's going in there with many good reasons, and not the least of which is also to free the Iranian people from a dictator, having to do with Sharia law and, a country that has been locked down going back to the way earlier than the Middle Ages, ancient, really. So, and then there's the Israel Iran relationship that is also focused here because the Anunnaki are running Israel. And so they are instrumental in wanting to bring all of this to the head, and possibly also instrumental in wanting to kickstart the release of this oil dependency on the Strait of Hormuz, and certainly Iran's role in that. Now, there is another issue that has to do with this canal that was being built, which is called the Ben Gurion Canal. And that was the reason for the genocide in Palestine, unfortunately. And that is still key, as well as going to be another reason why this area of the world is absolutely being revamped and transformed. And that's going to affect the whole world. And that's why Stargate 10 is also part of that, because it is a kind of a fulcrum, it seems to me, of this energy war. And guarding those stargates has everything to do with also Iran, and at the time Iraq, the war with Iraq that had to do with the Stargate in Iraq that was under the museum. These are portal stargates that let in, that where these sort of diabolical rulers can be letting in aliens with high tech that can put them ahead of the rest of the world, and then they could turn around and try to subjugate the rest of us. So these are huge issues. This is not a superficial, war scenario at all. It's actually front and center, primary, and Trump is doing what he is supposed to be doing, actually, under, I believe, orders from even off-world civilizations, and certainly dealing also with the Anunnaki and possibly their scenario for change in the Middle East, the way they see it may be wrapped in here. So that shouldn't be overlooked either. So I'm going to go back to my article here. And so we're looking at what's going on. So the AI is in essence taking my scenario, filling it out with a little more detail here, talking about TAE's neutral beam technology and this merger that's going on, vertical integration pipeline, a path to utility scale plant that's being fast tracked, space domain awareness, infrared component linking to plasma propulsion to national defense, and so on. So this is really important stuff. And so I know that the news most of the media, even including the alternative media, just aren't going here. Okay, they're not understanding this scenario. Um, and then again, what we're talking about, they called entropy as a tool because the key players in the technology are have been removed as of now. Now, then they, I guess, they asked me a question saying, does this scenario align with your research on the functional nodes, meaning the humans that have disappeared? And would you like to explore infrared space domain awareness links? And I think that that's a misdirect for the moment. So I then, we then go into, I can't remember how this came about, but this part that follows has to do with the disappearance and the mention of the various people, the plasma containment, advanced metallurgy, space domain awareness, strategic evaporation and clean egress relates to what I have been asking about. And then they go through each of the people that have been interfered with and what or disappeared. And they discuss, this is them discussing my theory. So then they talk about above black and extraction, as I refer to it, and how probable I guess that is to some degree. Whereas law enforcement maintains these are unrelated incident, citing the motive in the Laura case um, uh, as being this lack, a specific motive of jealousy of this coworker or mentoring situation, um, and talking about that along with. So what the AI see AI is not going to really give you great answers about something like this, but they are repeating it and focusing on the sort of the situation so that they can redescribe it. So it's mirroring what I'm asking it and redescribing it. Um, and then they're talking, the next question they asked me if I want them to investigate the patents held by Monica Riza and the directed energy exposure reports involving Mccasland prior to his disappearance. And then I ask them, how does the disappearance of Mccasland relate to the death of Nuno Lorio, MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center head, along with Riza Cassius Gilmar, Jason Thomas? Is this a case of strategic evaporation? And this, then they answer me um, with the connection between the groups of people and the keys to that technology, again, feeding this back and going through each individual and this Mondaloy special rocket metal that Riza was involved with when she disappeared on a hiking trip. Um, and that just sort of feeds that back to me. Uh, And then it kind of goes down into some investigation or discussion about um, the individuals represent these nodes. They disappeared while hiking. Um, these are ways to disappear people, obviously. Law enforcement is related. These are saying these are unrelated, but they are not because there's a circle of influence, as they call it. Again, all coming back to this trillion-dollar commercial venture, which just compounds the importance of what's happening here. Um, and then I ask it to consider my hypothesis that these deaths are faked. When they talk about fireballs or cloaked objects that were mentioned in this other AI document that was uh, put forward by John Walson. Uh, they basically were saying that this is UFOs. So when you talk about fireballs or cloaked objects, you're actually referring to possibly plasma beings, UFOs, plasma engines as part of, you know, basically craft, and calling these deaths strategic extractions, suggesting these individuals are not lost but collected to manage an impending planetary or national security event. And we don't know if that's what's going to happen, if that's what it's about. And then it goes into this To the Stars Academy, who are publishing fictional books about the space program and various things like about Area 51 and various things. They also have one or two books that are not fiction. They're more like dissertations on the story. But I read one of them and it's really contains almost nothing of worth. Sorry to say. I think the fictional books are better. Um, and then I actually do go into the Lou Elizondo targeting. And again, they go into explaining the Lou Elizondo. See, and the deer are basically gray aliens. So there's a logical connection here with Lou Elizondo and his work, that this was a targeting, that the gray aliens under direction of the negative side of the secret space program, which would be the reptilians, probably did, organize that event to where Elizondo would be also. He's not taken off the game board completely. He's injured, very, very badly injured. However, I think he's very strong, so I think he's going to recover. I sent him and his, by way of his one of his assistants, this information about the deer being ETs. Now, he may have already known this because he's very deep in. He would know at least as much as I know, if not a great deal more. So I'm probably not telling him anything he doesn't already know, but I do think that he would appreciate that someone out there also reaches this conclusion and realizes that he is targeted. So, and I think it's really sad because he's been a very staunch fighter on behalf of disclosure lately. There was a time when he was much more part of the secret space program intelligence community. But then he switched gears at a certain point and really came forward and has been an incredible, um, warrior for disclosure since then. So some of this stuff is repeated by the SSP, having to do with various things I say. And then they want to know if I want to talk about the Mondaloy Medal and Monica Riza. At that point, I was not able to continue the conversation with the AI, but I will do so. Simply because it helps when you're bouncing these things off an AI that organizes them in certain ways, talks about them in certain ways, uses language that I wouldn't necessarily use as a lay person, but the AI does seem to tap into some of the language used in, by scientists and engineers and probably the intel agents involved in this story. So just to wrap this up, the bottom line here is that we have a number of telltale signs that this is not your average, I guess, having a hit out on somebody and then killing them, that the dark side would do in this battle behind the scenes for disclosure, by the way. So this battle for disclosure involves MJ12, what used to be known as MJ12, but they go by many names nowadays. And I have to say that their members have changed, I'm sure, over the years. Uh, and I and we had very good intel for a while about that group, MJ12, because of Dan Brewer getting involved in it and talking to us on my videos about that. But there is also reason to believe they turned against us and they started threatening us at a certain point because we have a witness, a secret witness that came forward who had worked for many years in the secret space program. He went by the fake name of Henry Deacon for a long time and then eventually came out under his own name, which is um, Arthur Neumann. And we have a lot of information on my website, including his reports that he gave us in the early days about what was going to happen, most of which are already happening and have happened now. And so he was right on a great deal of his information. You can go back and check it. You can do a search under his fake name, the assumed name that we gave him actually, which is Henry Deacon. That was from this sci-fi TV show. Actually, I don't remember the name of that show, but it was very good. That used to be out, several years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something. And then eventually he came out under his own name, Arthur Neumann. I think his real last name might be von Neumann, who is related to this German scientist. So he might be part of that bloodline, just throwing that out. He has gone to black, gone to ground, disappeared, as you might imagine. But before he disappeared, he did appear at my conference in Burbank, um, where I was able to go on stage and interview him and talking about the jump room to Mars and going to Mars for lunch and various things of this nature that have to do with portal tech again. So I have a great deal of information on my website through whistleblowers on all these subjects, but right now this particular story is kind of bringing a lot of these pieces together and focusing them. Where it's going to go from here, I don't know, obviously, but it is really fascinating that this is actually a form of disclosure that is asked backwards. They don't want you to, have disclosure, I don't think, but the fake killings are, I think, a bell ringer, and the disappearances and the fact that these people are probably being taken into black projects, going underground physically or off planet completely. So this is very important, key information. I hope people will understand now better what's really going on with this story that I don't think anyone else out there is put it together in quite this way. So I hope you will do your own research, follow my leads, and I'm going to continue to follow this story, obviously. Hopefully, I haven't forgotten to cover anything in particular here because there's so many, trails to follow. But I think that this will make some sense to people out there. Thank you very much for listening and take care. Bye bye.